Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Crowder Booth Live Monday night edition. Bryce Kuhn alongside Ralph Leary. Ralph, it's Labor Day weekend. Happy Labor Day to yourself. You had the day off today. That means you get to relax tonight. You have the day off tomorrow. You get to watch some college football. We all enjoyed college football all weekend long. We appreciate you tuning in, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, watching here live tonight, where it is going to be almost close to a full hour, Ralph, of college football conversation. I think there is no doubt that this is the time of the year when we were just watching a way too long of a baseball game, and we now have college football in tow. So we're excited for that. We're excited to see some of the comments because, listen, especially in this area, especially Columbus, Georgia, you have a little bit of everything with college football. So we're excited for that aspect as well. And we're going to kick it off with probably the biggest game of the weekend going into the weekend. Arguably, people thought it was the biggest game out of conference-wise that we might see all season until you got to the playoff, Ralph, and that is the domination defensively that we saw Georgia impose on Clemson. 10-3, Georgia wins this game. And, Ralph, first off, I know that this is something that a lot of people have opinions. We're going to dive into it, but just from a surface-level standpoint, what was the big takeaway for you? Not going too much into kind of the schematics and different things we saw, but maybe just a big surface level takeaway we saw from that game.
The final score. I was expecting at least both teams to score 20 plus. We did not get that at all. A combined score of 13, which I don't think anyone saw that coming at all. I really don't. I was expecting a shootout, honestly. I felt like both teams' defenses were very good and very talented, but the offenses were stand out. They would, both quarterbacks throw about 300, 350, and both teams may rush for 100, 150 yards, maybe have a player with 100 plus, but we didn't see that. We saw just defense on defense on defense all night long, and, it would have been a 3-3 ball game in the fourth quarter if Georgia didn't have a pick six. So It was all defense. If you don't like all defense, I'm sorry. You probably hated the game, but, hey, if you're a big defensive guy, it was one of the most exciting games to watch. Both teams had big defensive stops, big defensive plays, and overall, it was just a fun game to watch if you love college football in general.
Yeah, especially that old school style. And there was a lot of the comments after were Kirby Smart loved it. I mean, from his style, the way he loves to play defense, going into half 7-0, that was something that he welcomed. And I think when you look at what Clemson tried to do offensively, what Georgia did defensively, 7 sacks by 6 different guys. I mean, everybody was getting involved. Ralph, we talked about it in our podcast episode that you and I released kind of previewing this game. And, Palmer Toms and I talked about it in a Georgia season preview. We felt that Georgia's defensive line had talent. I don't know if anybody thought the front seven would do what they did against Clemson's offensive line. So let's start there. And the big thing, before we talk about Georgia, let's talk about Clemson. They never looked comfortable. And DJU, as people are referring to him now, DJU, he never really looked comfortable, and for good reason. He didn't have a lot of time. We talked about the offensive line struggles. What did you see from the offensive line that made you I should say, what did you see from this Clemson offensive line?
I just saw a lot of rotation. I saw a lot of miscommunication, a lot of missed blocks, some bad snaps, bad reads. I mean, overall, just if I had to grade Clemson's offensive line, I'm giving them an F. I mean, obviously, I know you got a lot of rotation, a lot of miscommunication, but that's common week one because it's week one. You're going to see something different, but you're a Division I powerhouse school. You got to learn how to play with each other, no matter who's next to you. I mean, because, next year, 2 years, you're going to have someone different next to you when you're playing in the league, or the guy next to you moves on. So communication always needs to be key, no matter who's the guy next to you, because you should be practicing them all fall camp, unless it's like some odd, decision where they had to have a defensive lineman can play offensive line, which happens often. People don't realize that, but it happens too often, in college football. But I don't think DJU could get his feet, set in the game, and I mean that is because he was running for his life 70% of the game. And it reminds me of Mahomes in the Super Bowl this past year, where he just couldn't get set back there. The Buccaneers defense took over that game. Georgia's defense led this game from the beginning to the end. They had the whole of Clemson's offense on their heels all night long. I mean, you had 23 attempts for Clemson running the ball, and they had 2 yards.
Yeah, there was no running game established whatsoever.
Yeah, you had 3 players with positive yards, but the 7 sacks they had, it canceled all that out, and it shows you how great of a defense that Georgia has, and how rough of an offensive line Clemson had Saturday night.
Zach McKinnell in there tuning in over on YouTube. We appreciate you tuning in, Zach. The UGA defensive game plan should be put in the College Football Hall of Fame. It was an absolute clinic, plus missing their best DB, arguably in Tyke Smith. It was amazing to watch. Ralph, we talked about the secondary, and Zach hits it on right there. That was one of the concerns for Georgia. Listen, they played great. Now, there were some growing pains. There's some young guys back there. Keely Ringo, number 5, the freshman cornerback. He's going to be fantastic. That's the plan for him, at least, to be a very good player. But when you look and see what this team did, Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart and company, and throw in Will Muschamp. I know he was somewhere in that aspect too. They did a fantastic job of game planning against this Clemson offensive line. Now, this is kind of where it comes into play. Was it more of bad offensive play for Clemson? But I think you have to give credit to Georgia, because Georgia defensively went in down there and shut down an offense. I know it doesn't have Trevor Lawrence, doesn't have a Travis Etienne. They still had some weapons, though, Ralph. And anytime you limit a top 5 program to 3 points, 2 yards rushing, like you alluded to, they took a whole – essentially what they did in my head was they took the run game away. It's hard to run on Georgia. I mean, Georgia's been one of the toughest teams to run on in the past 2 to 3 years. They said DJ's going to have to beat us with his arm. He couldn't do that because they were getting such great pressure. But what were some of the guys that stuck out to you for Georgia's defense? I mean, one that comes to mind was the play of Nakobe Dean flying all around the field.
I mean, yeah, even Nakobe Dean with 2 sacks and just an incredible presence on the defensive line. I mean, he was in the backfield almost every play, it felt like. And that shows you how great he was playing, honestly, because, he had DJ running for his life. A few other guys, I mean, one guy in particular, and we talk about him all the time, and I think it's Jordan Davis. I mean, you can talk about someone who just abused 3 guys who played at guard and center and guard for Clemson. He just sat there and made them, scared out of their mind. I know you got a freshman or another guy playing guard or center. They're not used to playing that, but when you're getting abused on the offensive line like that, you're not ready to play college football. I mean, Jordan Davis had them running. I mean, scared. I mean, Jordan Davis, he's a huge man. And I know how big I've seen how big he is on TV and compared to other people. But when you see someone do what he can do at his size, it changes not just the game. It changes the whole outcome of a season for Georgia, because that sets the tone at the line that they can't run the ball in the middle on you. They're not bouncing outside. I mean, he has some speed in the safety position, the corner position, and even the outside linebackers. I mean, Georgia's almost had the best defense in the country right now to me.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Jordan Davis. I mean, his mere presence along the defensive line, you're going to have to double team him. You throw in guys like super senior Devontae Wyatt, number 95, who got pressure from the outside, Adam Anderson, Nolan Smith, who kind of led us off with the big sack right there in the opening quarter, the opening possession for the Tigers. I mean, all around, you can talk about what Clemson's deficiencies along the offensive line, but you have to capitalize on it, and you got to give credit to Dan Lanning and staff. They knew what the weakness is, and they attacked it. And I will say this, we've watched, obviously, in this area, there's a lot of Georgia fans, and I'd love to hear from Georgia fans throughout the show, throughout this week, as we kind of get ready for week 2 of the college football season. I don't know if we've ever seen a defensive performance from Georgia specifically quite like what we saw on Saturday night, how they exploited the mistakes. Because would you agree, Ralph, when you know that the game plan's there, You still have to execute it, and Georgia executed it to perfection.
Well, that's every week. Coaches always say the game plan was there. We just didn't execute.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia's game plan was there, and they executed, and that just shows you, coaching and talent combined can create a very dangerous monster. And that's that's just what I'm going to say with it, because Georgia's defense was a monster, and that's what they did. They scared the crap out of Clemson. I mean,
they sure did.
Clemson's season now is in the hands of everyone else in the ACC, because if they can't find wins in the ACC with other teams, I mean, it's gone.
I want to ask you this, because we have Clemson never looked comfortable. ... Will they? We're going to go to Georgia. We're going to talk about them. But for Clemson, I think there's some real issues. We learned after the fact E.J. Williams, one of the star receivers who's from this area, is going to miss 4 to 6 weeks with an injury. Listen, Justin Ross, he wasn't the greatest comeback story of the weekend. We're going to get more to that later on in the show, but a good comeback story nonetheless. For him to even be stepping on a football field is quite the miracle. When you look at this roster and you look at this team, I think they're still, in the contention for a championship. They can be. It's week 1. But it's hard when you play an opponent like that. We're going to talk about a team later on that no one knew what they were going to look like offensively, and they put up 60-something points. If Clemson would have had that opportunity, we may not be talking about that. So, but you play against elite competition. Clemson, the past 2 games, has faltered. Ohio State in the playoff, and now Georgia here in week 1. What do they have to do? They have to find some consistency along the offensive line, and to me, Ralph, they're going to have to find a stable running game.
I mean, and you're talking about getting comfortable. I mean, I think your hardest game might be Boston College in October from here on out, because, I mean, you have South Carolina State, who we know they'll probably beat by 50. Georgia Tech, who is –
we're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that later.
NC State, who could be trouble. But you never know. I mean, and Boston College might be the only team I see on this schedule this year who's worth anything. And I mean that in a way, because Florida State's sitting down there, and Florida State may be a topic at the very end of the show tonight.
Yeah.
Clemson needs to figure out what they want to do, because they either have to blow everyone out this year and just show just absolute dominance throughout the conference, or just pray that UNC finds something going on, because their week 1 performance was not up to what we expected. So Clemson's sitting in a corner right now, hoping and praying that everyone else can show up.
Yeah, Clemson's going to have – I don't necessarily agree with the statement of, well, it's fine, they can run through the rest of their schedule, they'll be fine, they'll be back in the playoff. I mean, this is a team with some deficiencies. I think we saw that on display. Georgia's defense, top 5, I think no doubt, but you have to be able to perform against those. Clemson did not. I think that was something that was tough to see. Flip it. Let's flip it now to Georgia, and we're going to hold them to that same standard, Ralph. You have to be able to perform against some top-tier defenses. We know Clemson's defensive line, and I want to go more in depth in this, because you and I were talking on Saturday, and then late Saturday night I was texting you, and the big question is, we know Georgia's defense played well. Is there a concern for Georgia's offense? So let's explain that to the viewers and the people who are going to be watching this after the fact. Clemson lined up in a soft zone the whole night. JT Daniels said post-game, that's not what they were expecting out of the Clemson Tiger defense. It was one of those things, and that happens. That happens sometimes in games. What do? You go through some drives, you feel it out, you make adjustments.
Yeah.
Georgia, to me, knowing that, did what they needed to do. Pretty much Clemson said, we're going to drop 7 to 8 people back in coverage. We think our defensive line, which we'll say is an elite defensive line, can just go man-to-man against your offensive line and can beat them. That did not happen. Georgia's offensive line, I think, stepped up to the charge. We saw, especially later in the game, they were able to wear them down.
Mm-hmm.
But for Georgia to be successful, they're going to need to get a little bit more vertical. We're going to need to see more explosive plays from the Bulldogs and Todd Monken. Now, give them credit. They took what Clemson gave them. Brock Bowers, the freshman tight end, was featured exclusively there in the first couple drives. JT Daniels hit a seam route. There were some opportunities where they were able to pick apart Clemson's defense. But for you, knowing what you know about how Clemson lined up defensively, are you overly concerned about what Georgia's offense looks like or might look like?
Well, at first, I was worried about their passing game, because a swing pass, screenplay, 4 times a drive. I was like, I think Georgia's either scared, doesn't know what to do. And then we talked after the game, and we kind of saw what was going on. I understood it more, but I'm not really concerned, because they have the talent on that offense. A lot of receivers were banged up. I mean, was it Kearis Jackson who could only field punts on Saturday?
Yeah, Kearis Jackson. I'll name off Kearis Jackson. Jermaine Burton was banged up. He played, but he was banged up. You didn't obviously have George Pickens. Darnell Washington. Eric Gilbert was out. I mean, this was a roster. I mean, and this is no offense, but they had guys out there that were not even featured in the 2 deep 2 weeks ago. And talented guys, nonetheless, they'll be able to contribute down the line. But I think that limited to what JT Daniels and Todd Monken wanted to be able to do.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned because I say it every year, and I'm gonna keep saying it until it's never true. When you have 4 running backs in your running back room who can start at respectable college football programs and be their number one guy, you're not worried about anything. In a team that we saw Clemson have 2 yards rushing, I think Georgia had 123 with Zamir White leading the way, who is a senior running back. Who I mean, as much as I am a power guy, I love run the ball down the middle, beat man one-on-one offensive line. Zamir White is a run-heavy guy. He's going to lean forward. He does stand up a lot, and I am concerned with that. If he tries to make it in the league, he won't make it doing that. But with the way Georgia's offense is set up this year, a lot of runs, more deep balls. I need to see passes over 30 to 40 yards.
Yeah.
I don't think I saw one. I understand Clemson's defense. Like we talked after the game, I realized it then. But during the game, I was like, I don't think no one's completed a pass over 30 to 40 yards because they can't. Yeah.
And I'll say this too, and the argument, I guess, against that is you never want to be, Georgia fans, I don't think they should be the ones that, a lot of people on message boards and everything over the past couple of days complaining about a win. You just beat Clemson. And JT Daniels said the best. Listen, he said, no, I'm not going to complain. We just beat the number 3 team in the country. I mean, we'll figure those things out. They're talented enough, like you said. They have the running backs. They have the talent. They've got to get healthy. And luckily, and I'll read this off too, Zamir White finished 13 carries for 74 yards. That's good for 5.7 yards a carry. I mean, that's a good day. Good day at the office. Now, obviously, they didn't get to punch it in the end zone offensively. But I think one of the big things, Ralph, is they did what they needed to do when they needed to do it. And that was something Georgia struggled with last year. Could they convert in those type of situations? They did. Walk me back to the 4th and 5 that Clemson had. Nakobe Dean, we talked about him earlier, rushing 3 guys on DJ. Georgia gets the ball with 4.5 minutes. In previous seasons, Georgia fans are, oh gosh, here comes the 3 and out. They're going to get the ball back. And what did they do, Ralph? That offensive line leaned on a very tired defensive line for Clemson, and Zamir White, one of those final runs, Ralph, when he ran over 2 guys, I mean, that's what you're talking about, that power football. If they can add the play action, I mean, I'm telling you, if you can play action off of that and get Jermaine Burton, Kearis Jackson down the middle of the field, it truly has the makings to be an elite, balanced team.
And thinking about that, what you just said about the play action, and one thing I kind of compare their offense to a pro team is the Tennessee Titans. Yeah. We're talking about a team with a running back who is running close to 2,000 yards a year with Derrick Henry, and then you have Ryan Tannehill, who's not an elite quarterback, does what he has to do, but his play action work is the reason why he's still a quarterback in the league because, now you got Julio Jones and then A.J. Brown. You're talking about a very scary-looking team for NFL, but I'm not trying to talk about NFL, but Georgia's offense can do the same thing, run heavy, and then hit a play action down the seam. And it's a different ball game because you have to stop the ball going over the top, and you got to stop the ball in the ground. And you can't stop both at the same time because you have to have the different personnel for that. And you may not have guys who are fast enough to cover a 6'8" tight end who is fast as most wideouts. So even another 6'6" tight end who's basically a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. So you don't know what to do against Georgia. If you find out what to do, please let me know because I'm very concerned.
Well, and that's the thing too. I don't think there should be concern for Georgia's offense. You have to remember too, anyone who's sitting here saying that Georgia is not a good team or doesn't have a good offense, you just played a top 5 defense in Clemson. Like Clemson's going to take certain things away from you, and they did that. They sat in that soft zone and they said, and I'll say this too, it was probably smart by Monken and company because JT knows, what if he does throw that, Ralph, and they're playing, cover 4 back there, and they got 4 DBs back, and he throws a pick. Now, I know he had the interception, which if you go back was a fantastic read by that linebacker. But
give it to him,
yeah, you're just giving it to him. So they took what Clemson gave them, and they won the game. Now, the big difference is, before we move on, because I know we're spending a lot of time on this game, but for good reason, The big thing is we've seen that. Georgia can lean on the defense in the run game and win games ugly. We know that. Now, they just did it against one of the best teams in the country, but now can you flip the script and what makes teams elite, what makes them championship caliber and championship level? Can you turn around and can you, like you said, run, play action, and find a guy 40 yards down the field? Daniels has the arm talent. I think he's got the wherewithal. I think this offense has the pieces. And I'll say this too. Georgia has the schedule. You and I were talking about this on October 9th, which is arguably their next big test. We're going to talk about that Auburn football team here coming up later on the show. They head to Jordan-Hare. In between that, they have UAB, South Carolina, and I think maybe Kentucky sandwiched in there.
Vanderbilt and then Arkansas.
Vanderbilt and Arkansas. Kentucky's later on the season. Now, listen, you never want to go ahead and just write teams off, but I think with Georgia –
Vanderbilt off. Go ahead and write them off. Just write them off. Please.
We'll talk about that as well. But
we shouldn't.
But I'll say you never want to just say, Ralph, oh, well, that's a win, because you still got to play the game.
Right.
And we saw this weekend, some teams wish the games would have been played on paper. But I think you still play the game. But would you agree the schedule shapes up from now to October 9th? Georgia should, by October 9th, one, they'll be healthy. They may have some guys back that we don't know. I mean, there's not out of the question. Some people are saying George Pickens could come back late this season because, one, of how ACL injuries are dealt with, and that's talking about late, like SEC championship to a potential playoff. But you could get guys back in Kyrus Jackson, Jermaine Burton. Those guys get fully healthy.
Eric Gilbert,
and two,
Darnell Washington also.
Darnell Washington as well. Yeah. But also, your schedule is favorable for you to figure out what your offense has before that October 9th matchup.
Well, and not even that. I mean, you have 4 games where you're able to, just I'm not going to call them scrimmage games because they're not. But you're playing.
But from a talent standpoint, this is the team that should not lose any of those games.
I completely agree. And I don't think they should have a problem really until October 30th. And I'm saying that because that's Florida, who is. We're not getting into that right now because that's later in the season. But yeah, this is your games where you have to. You're always the second game of the season for most SEC teams. You got to learn, fix your mistakes from week 1.
Mm-hmm.
Go up. Let's air it out more. Let's show what our offense can do. Let's run it up on some small school, and then we'll come into week 3. You got your first SEC opponent. I know it's South Carolina, who is who knows them at quarterback. It could be a guy on the side of the road, maybe a team photographer. Who knows? So right now, Georgia is set perfectly for a solid undefeated season. You beat the hardest team on your schedule this year, in my opinion. The SEC championship is that one game that is just looming in the back of their heads because they make it. We know who's probably going to be there waiting on them.
And we're about to talk about them. Before we talk about that game, I'll say this, and we'll go straight to it. I'm not in the company of wanting to talk about playoff talk right now, but with the win Georgia just had, if things shake out like what you just said, there's a very strong possibility the door is open now for 2 SEC teams to get into that playoff. We're going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about this team in the Alabama Crimson Tide. Boy. I got to give a shout out to an old teacher of ours, Jacob Crowder. Saw him the other day. He said, I hadn't commented on the show because you haven't talked about the Crimson Tide lately. Well, Mr. Crowder, here we are. We're talking about the Crimson Tide. Ralph, what is there to say? I mean, this is a program that lost arguably one of the greatest offenses of all time. Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. I mean, lost arguably one of the best, one of the best offensive fronts that we've seen in a long time. And what do, Ralph? They go and put up and blow out a top 15 program in Miami. I mean, now we can talk about Miami, but that's what the preseason ranking was. For you, I mean, I think a lot of people thought, and we said this too for Alabama purposes, if you were going to beat Alabama, it's going to be this year. I think they showed you. They're not going to necessarily be Mac Jones-esque, but man, what did Alabama show you here week 1 against Miami?
That Bryce Young is what we thought he could be. I mean, that was the big question. That was the big question was Bryce Young, what can he do? We haven't seen much of him, and the few times we saw him were just, garbage time snaps. Mm-hmm. Bryce Young breaks the all-time Alabama first-time quarterback record. I mean, that is like the first start for quarterbacks for Alabama history. He breaks the record with 344 yards, 4 touchdowns. And you look back and see who his quarterbacks are in the past, that's A.J. McCarron, that's Tua, that's Mac, that's Jalen Hurts, and that's Greg McElroy, who are all current NFL quarterbacks or former NFL quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think am I wrong when I say this? Didn't all those quarterbacks win a national championship too? Right?
In some form or fashion, yeah, they did.
So you're talking about you're in great company with that one. I think Alabama's offense looked electric. I thought it looked better than I expected. They were able to throw the ball on the run, which Bryce Young, to me, he is a very talented quarterback. He's very young. He's very mobile. We haven't seen really a mobile quarterback since Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Jalen Hurts is nearly as fast as Bryce Young.
No, Bryce Young looks – I'll say this, and Jack, we're going to get you your comment. Appreciate you tuning in. I'll say this. I think Tua had the ability to run if needed. Mac Jones had the ability to run if
fragile.
needed. Jalen Hurts was built like a running back. Bryce Young is more athletic and lean built, I would say.
Well, one thing I did notice, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you watched any of the game. Bryce Young, to me, throws better on the run than he does sitting in the pocket.
Which is usually flip-flop for a young quarterback.
And that's the weird thing, I know. And that's what I'm saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. If anyone saw something differently, I watched as much as I could. But when Bryce Young's throwing on the run, he looks way more comfortable, which is weird to me. But he was throwing, just strikes down the field, just hitting his guys on stride. That's a hard thing to do. If you're running as hard as you can away from the defense, and you're just sitting there, you got to throw across your body, and you're hitting that guy in stride. That's impressive. I'm not saying Heisman talk yet, but you're talking about a guy who is a sophomore quarterback who played 1 year behind Mac Jones in a COVID year, didn't get much experience last year, stepped up to the plate, and he knocked it out of the ballpark for him.
He sure did. And I think that's what the big thing is. He knocked it out of the ballpark. Zach watching over here. His passing grade was higher under pressure than when not pressure. He threw all 4 TDs under pressure. So, Ralph, you talk about that. It backs up exactly what you were saying.
Man.
And it's not to say the kid was bad when he was sitting in the pocket. And then he was helped out too, man, because we talked about Devontae Smith, all of these guys they've had over the past 2 seasons. What do? They go out and get Jamison Williams, a transfer from Ohio State. They have John Mechie. Jamison Williams is a problem. The kid is a bad man, Zach McKenna. Ralph,
he's a bad man.
Jamison Williams, 4 receptions, 126 yards, a touchdown. John Mechie, 6 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. Cameron Latou, 3 receptions, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They had a total of, let's go here, 28 receptions. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 different guys catch the football. Oh, and by the way, that doesn't count the running backs, who accounted for 147 on the ground. Ralph, this Alabama team is dangerous. They're very, very good. And I'm telling you, all the preseason hype, they talk about that Texas A&M game. It's going to be interesting to watch. But how week 1 shaked out for me was these 2 teams. We don't need to spend a ton of time on this. Yeah. Georgia and Alabama are on a crash course. If Georgia figures out that offense, holy cow. Mercedes-Benz, or they call it East Tuscaloosa, for Alabama fans, that's going to be one heck of a matchup. Don't want to get too far ahead, but I think it's safe to say these 2 teams right now are the favorites to go and meet in Atlanta.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's no one really stepped up in the SEC. I think LSU struggled on the road. I think A&M is kind of in a slow, not really a rebuilding year, but new quarterback, just not there yet. And I don't think Florida has what they think they have.
Don't think that they do. We're going to talk about one more member of the SEC when we come back. We're going to have a quick commercial, and then we'll be back and talking about those Auburn Tigers that, hey, the offense for Auburn, Ralph, looked pretty good. We're going to talk about that and more when we come back.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place, fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?
Back here on the Karate Booth Live. Hey, do you like our new little background, little layout we got here? We're featuring the red, white, and black, which is hysterical because this is not a Georgia-oriented podcast or anything, but it's the colors of the logo and the colors of the show.
Ole Miss on tonight, though.
We got the Ole Miss on tonight. We're going to talk about that Ole Miss Louisville game. Hey, we're going to take you from this game all the way right up into kickoff. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch. We can't wait to say that. Let's say about this right here. It's UGA and Bama, then everyone else. I'm not sure if anyone can get within 20 against them in the SEC. Zach, I love that. That's going to be interesting to watch how that develops. That Georgia-Florida game is going to be fun. Obviously, Alabama and Texas A&M is one that's been highly touted as well. But, Ralph, there's a team. They call their home area the loveliest village on the plains. The Auburn Tigers underwent a massive facelift, an overhaul of what they wanted to do. They played Akron, who didn't win a game last year and is no one to write home about. But I think you have to take this game and you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's Akron. You did what you wanted to do, but the way they executed the game plan, much like what you talked about earlier, Ralph, was impressive. What did you see from this game? What did you see from Auburn that should give Auburn fans hope? And maybe, you don't want to get too ahead of yourself, but could lead to a successful year under Brian Harsin in year one.
Well, I mean, as much as I saw, as I watched the game, I thought that Tank Bigsby was, as great as he was last year.
He's just good. I mean, there's going to be certain things in life, and Tank Bigsby running for 100-plus yards is probably going to be one of them.
And I don't think anyone will sleep on Tank Bigsby. I think he, in my opinion, is the best running back in the SEC. And it shows you because he probably had the best game out of the SEC running backs, I think, as I know of. Bo Nix looked comfortable. I feel like he wasn't running for his life. Last year, I think he ran way too much. He got hit way too much, and he wasn't prepared really last year. I don't think he had the development that he was earned and deserved. I mean, he's a very talented quarterback. He wouldn't be playing for Auburn if he wasn't talented. True. I thought he threw the ball very well. I thought his receivers caught the passes he threw very well, which is impressive enough. I think Auburn had a lot of drops last year, and like AJ said, performed well. I think he did too. I think the whole team for Auburn performed very well. We saw a lot of young guys, and we saw one from a local guy get a touchdown, Kobe Hudson from Troup County. Huge game for Auburn. I think a lot of fans walk away happy with this, the way it looked, the way it turned out. You got 612 total yards. I don't think Auburn saw 612 total yards last year unless it was put against them.
Love that. No, this would be something too. You mentioned it. AJ, love it. Jaquez Hunter, what a night for him. Or Jarquez Hunter, 9 carries, 110 yards and a touchdown. Ralph, Auburn had 315 yards on the ground. The two biggest things about Auburn for me, and we talked about this, was and I talked about this with our guy we did the preview last week, was offensive line play. That was going to carry them, and Bo Nix. I love what you said. Bo Nix looked comfortable. The final stat line on Bo Nix, 20 of 22, 275 yards and 3 touchdowns. Listen, that's going to win you some ball games. I know. Now, listen, when they play Penn State in a couple weeks, schematically, it may look the same. Personnel-wise, it's going to take a step up from Akron. And I like what Zach says here. Auburn fans already, Nix for Heisman, but in actuality, he goes, I think LSU became a very winnable game, but I think Penn State could look like a problem with their defense. It's going to pose a big test. We're going to go do an in-depth preview. I might have to bring on Zach to talk about the Auburn Tigers in that aspect of it well. Zach's very educated on Auburn. We've loved having him on the show. And AJ, you get a shout out from AJ Ingram. We appreciate AJ you watching as well. That was funny, Ralph. Hey, Ralph can be funny sometimes. But I'll say this. You hit the nail on the head. He looked comfortable. They executed the game plan the way they wanted, and that was key. That was the big thing. Could Auburn go in there and do that? And I'll say this too. Most people, if you don't know, I had the opportunity to call a game between a FCS school and an NAIA program last Thursday night. And the big thing we talked about, obviously, it was a blowout, Ralph. But good teams, great teams, beat teams like that in the way they should. And that's what Auburn did. And that's something that's big. They didn't play down to level opponent. And I'll even go back to the same program. A couple of years ago, Auburn plays that Mercer Bears team, and Mercer almost wins that game. Auburn plays an overmatched. Auburn plays an overmatched.
It was hot. It was not fun.
Auburn plays an overmatched Akron. And, Ralph, I think the big thing that fans can take away, they looked comfortable. Communication was on point, and they handled business the way they should. And I don't even know if we really need to go more in depth with it. And love it right here. If Bo wins the Heisman, Auburn wins the Natty. Love it, AJ. We love Auburn fans right there. That's a ton of fun. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch that team progress because, like I said, they're young. They've got some talent. Kobe Hudson was featured. And how many times, Ralph, do you see a guy in Kobe Hudson and then Tank Bigsby, rivals in high school, matching up and leading a team to victory? That was a pretty cool thing to watch as well. Yeah, so We're going to talk a little bit more about some college football here. Obviously, we have it going forward. Who's more back? This is a fun conversation. Now, I want to set this up for you, Ralph, because we've talked a lot about this. And before I would do that, I want to go back to Zach's question, put it in there the last second. His biggest question is if the defensive line can consistently rush the passer. We had the advantage this weekend, but can we generate a pass rush against better opponents? It's a big question. Defensive line look well. Auburn's defense look well, but you got to be able to do it against the elite teams in college football.
Yeah.
Going back to this, previously elite teams. Ralph, I think when you look at my line right here, you and I had a show. We put the clip on Instagram, and this was probably about 2 months ago. And I asked you who has a better chance to be back, Tennessee or something like that. I think it's interesting to see this as well. And AJ, we're going to put it up here. No, heck no. The U is not back. The U is not back.
They were back last night or Saturday afternoon when they got back to Miami.
That's about it.
They've been back. I mean,
but who's more back? And let's right. When you look at two of those programs, Ralph, you're looking at two of the most storied college football programs in the history of the sport in Texas and Florida State. Teams with rich tradition. And Penn State in its own right, they've got a rich history as well.
Yeah, they do.
Now, the big thing in this is that one of the three programs here lost this weekend.
Yes.
We're going to talk about that. Texas with a win over Louisiana. That was a trendy upset pick for a lot of people here in week one. Penn State goes on the road to one of the best environments in college football in Wisconsin. Jump around was unreal. I don't know if you saw that. It was crazy.
I saw the replay of it. It looked fun.
And then Florida State right here, for me, and AJ just hit the nail on the head. Florida State is back. Heck of a game the other day. They should have freaking won. And AJ, I think you're right. The fight, the determination, the attitude that the Seminoles had on Sunday night, and this too, Ralph, what Florida State is. I mean, that Doak Campbell Stadium is one of the best environments in college football, and they've been down for the past 3 to 4 years. That's kind of been taken away. And so I think last night we saw what it can be. We saw what this program can be. So list in order 1 through 3. Who is more back? Not who's all the way back, not who's going to win a national title first, but in your opinion, who had the best showing? And I know Florida State lost, and you want to see wins, and that's the ultimate goal. But out of these three, if you had to rank them 1, 2, 3, how you going?
Texas, Florida State, Penn State. Easily. I think Texas showed up where they are not officially back. I think they have a very strong chance of being back this year. Their offensive explosion really stepped up. Sarkisian is at the helm. I really love Sarkisian. He really just kind of sits at Texas very well. He can show up when games are, I think like the past few coaches for Texas haven't really showed up in those big games. They had that one win every once in a while, and they said we're back, and they lose the next 3 games. Happens every year. We see it every time. Sarkisian's a different mindset, Texas. I really think Texas has a chance to take the Big 12 by storm for this year. And then when they get to the SEC, could really settle in very well. Florida State, to me, Florida State showed up big. I mean, you're talking about a team that has not much going for them in the past few years. So they've had a rough go about it. They've taken some gut punches. They really have. Quarterbacks haven't been playing very well, haven't had the talent. A lot of people transferring out. Coaches haven't been very well for them. You take on Notre Dame at home first game of the year, a team that made it to the playoffs last year, lost their quarterback, lost a few defensive players, but came in with a very talented Jack Cohn, a great running back, and I always forget his name's last. You can remind me for me.
Yes.
The defense is still very well, but Florida State showed up, and I'm going to use a quote that my friend used this weekend. We were watching the game. Mckenzie Milton came in, which if you haven't watched that story, heard his story, please go look it up. Mckenzie Milton's back. I love it. As much as I didn't really like him when he played for UCF, I love him. I'm happy he got to play. I'm happy he came in and did what he did. But a kid lost his job because of his helmet falling off. Yeah. And that gave Mckenzie Milton the reason to get in the game and lead Florida State into a overtime loss, which – to me, it shouldn't have been an overtime loss. It should have probably been a blowout in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to throw Penn State last because I really don't think Penn State's been gone that long. Yeah. I feel like Penn State's been relevant the past few years. I feel like Penn State is still very good. They were good the past few years. Last year was a little of a fumble because a lot of guys opted out. But Penn State is still talented enough to make a run every year in their conference respectfully. Obviously, Ohio State, Wisconsin, who they beat, and Michigan if they ever show up. I like Texas and Florida State. I would love to see where those two end up at the end of the year. Very underrated programs. Florida State took on a very talented team and took them to overtime. And a lot of people didn't even count Florida State as a top 5 team in the ACC. And I think they right now the way they played, and I'm using another quote from my friend, they might be the best 0-1 team in the country.
They really might. I'll tell you one thing. It's definitely not the Washington Huskies. They're not the best 0-1 team in the country. Let's get to some comments right here. I like this because AJ and Zach are blowing up the comment section. Listen, keep doing it. We appreciate it. We don't want this show. We don't want you to necessarily agree with us all the time. We want to. That's what makes this show fun. That's what makes this show fun. AJ, starting off, FSU is back. That we talked about that. AJ felt like Penn State was a little bit fluky. He ranked them FSU, Penn State, and then Texas. And AJ kind of alluded to what you said, Ralph. Penn State just didn't perform well last year. They had opt-outs. Listen, they had one of the best players in college football, Micah Parsons, who didn't even suit up for them last year. But they're usually always in the hunt. And then you hit the name around the head of Ralph. FSU has been out since the end of Jimbo era. Them almost beating Notre Dame is a huge tone setter. And AJ, I want to equivalent this to you because this is something that stood out to me. Ralph, take us back four seasons ago, 2017. Kirby, and I'm going to go back to Georgia. Kirby Smart's second season. They go on the road with Notre Dame. And this is before Georgia, if you're a recent college football fan, this is before Georgia was kind of on the national title stage seemingly every year, playoff, on the cusp of the playoff. They needed a win that showed as a program, hey, we can do this. And Georgia got that when they went on the road to Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame wasn't the most talented team in the country that year, but the environment, everything that went into. AJ, I believe what you said right here. If Florida State did all they could to get that, and I think they still feel that way, the fan base rewarded them afterwards. They were chanting FSU after the game was over. They realized this program's on the come up. A rebuilt defense, Mike Norvell. Listen, if you can't recruit at Florida State, I don't know if you can recruit anywhere because they have a storied history, a great program, and they can do that. So for Georgia, that was the Notre Dame win. Florida State almost made it happen last night. I think they got about 75% there. When they get that first big win, and Ralph, I'm going to go look at their schedule, they've got opportunities. They play at North Carolina. We've already seen the Tar Heels are not immortal. They play at Clemson.
That's an upset watch, honestly, right
exactly.
now.
And listen to this. They play Miami, which is a rivalry game, and they play at Florida. There's some games on this schedule where Florida State could say, hey, we went 8-4, 9-3 this year, but we're back. This season, 2021, could be a launching pad for the next 5 to 6 years of where Florida State says, we can do this, and we have the opportunity. Going back to Zach's comment right here, he says Penn State. The team looked impressive against a tough Wisconsin team in a hostile environment, and that might be the best defense they faced until Ohio State, and they found a way to win. Now, I agree with you here, Zach. You win any way you can. A win's a win. I texted you that, Ralph, for Georgia fans as well. A win is a win, and I think that's one of the biggest keys to week one. If you can escape a big-time matchup like these programs had with a win, then you're fine. We haven't talked a ton about Texas. They got the win over Louisiana, who upset Iowa State last year. That was a big one as well because, like I said, those big games, Texas head coaches ever since Charlie Strong was hired after Mac Brown, Tom Herman, they really didn't win those big games. Obviously, especially in the regular season. That was kind of one of the big knocks on Texas head coaches. Ralph, anything you want to wrap up with this right here? I know we went through some comments. We appreciate everyone tuning in and letting us know, but anything you want to wrap up with this right here?
I really like what I saw from Texas. I know I already said it once. They're gonna have a tough schedule. Obviously, playing Big 12, you have Oklahoma who struggled, and we're talking about who's back. Are we starting to see the downfall of some of these bigger teams? Oklahoma struggled against Tulane. Washington struggled, or they lost to Montana. Miami got blown out by Alabama. Some of these Power 5 programs who are supposed to be like this dominant team in their conference every year are struggling in these big games. I know Miami had problems last year with Eric King being hurt, and he kind of looked like he got hurt during the game. I'm not really set on the top 5 in the country right now. I feel safe having Alabama and Georgia up there. And, I'm okay with Clemson being up in the top 5 because they lost to a very talented Georgia team. But Oklahoma did not show me anything And that right now told me that, and Iowa State also struggled in the Big 12. So is it bad to say right now? I still think I would say that Texas and Iowa are the best, or I'm sorry, just Texas are the best team in the Big 12 right now. After week one, just go off week one.
And I'll say this too, because that brings us kind of in our next thing. Week one constable takeaways. What was something we hadn't talked about, and you brought it up right there. AJ, we're going to get to your comment very quickly towards the end of the show. I like what you said because I tweeted out there. I said, "Wow, so much for people hyping up Oklahoma's defense this offseason."
Yeah,
and that's no disrespect to what Willie Fritz and Tulane offered. They are a solid American Conference team. This is not, I'll knock them. This is not Berry College coming in. Okay, it's not Berry College coming to play. Tulane had a quarterback. University. Yeah, it's not Point University. Tulane had a quarterback that is a freshman, set some records. He was good. And give credit, Tulane battled back. Oklahoma, and I'll say this, Ralph, you can't take your foot off the gas pedal. Oklahoma did that, and it's going to cost them against a big-time opponent when they play, and excuse me if I don't know if Oklahoma plays a big out-of-conference game this year. I feel like they do. I do know that they play Nebraska. They play Nebraska. That's not big at all. Nebraska just has a big logo. That's about it. That's all they have. It was a big logo. A big history. Yeah, that's all they have. Ralph, any final thoughts? Obviously, Mckenzie Milton was a cool story. We've talked about that a little bit. We're going to go in and we're going to close the show with some with our Ole Miss Louisville prediction that starts in about 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Anything for you, though, that you took away? Maybe people didn't see. Maybe it got lost in the limelight. Hey, if it's your Troy Trojans, if you want to shout those guys out. But seriously, what stood out to you that maybe kind of got lost in the shuffle?
If you weren't on your couch Saturday watching football from Thursday night to tonight, mm-hmm. you have missed a lot. That's all I have to say. Because right now, and then I love saying this, Bryce, college football is back.
Oh, it's back.
And we saw so much that we were not expecting to see week one. I mean, we saw a few upsets. We saw Kansas get their first win in 2 years and storm the field after beating a Division III school that has probably 4,000 students. I mean, we saw everything this weekend. I mean, we saw a Power 5 program lose to their own conference, and they were projected to win by 20. Mm-hmm. I mean, we saw everything we wanted to see in week one, and God, I love it. And we got 12 more weeks of this, 13 more weeks, and we got till almost what
January, really January. Yeah,
golly, college football's back. I love saying it. I love just waking up on Saturday morning, hearing College Game Day turn on, and just having some of the funniest moments. Watching guest picks, watching Lee Corso.
Don't ever invite Kane Brown for a guest pick ever again. That was terrible. That was bad.
I know a lot of Georgia fans and Alabama fans who hate when Lee Corso picks them because they always lose.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Corso picked the Dogs, and they went and won. So
they did. Let's get 2 more comments before we get to our quick look. And, hey, if you want to place those final bets, Ralph and I are going to tell you what you should do because obviously we are experts in that field. AJ, real quick, I have one last thing. What are your thoughts on game day choosing Iowa State over Oregon, Ohio State? For me, in this, Iowa State has provided some exciting games. I don't think you could have gone wrong. Obviously, Oregon, Ohio State provides a lot of intrigue. But, Ralph, I think this was a decision. I'm okay. I can live with that. Oregon, Ohio State is going to be a great game. But you were telling me, why didn't they pick that one, Ralph?
They're playing at 12 o'clock. Why would I want to wake up at 9:30 on Saturday and watch Oregon and Ohio State play at 12 o'clock? I want to watch that at 8:30.
Ridiculous.
Thank you, Fox. Thank you, Fox, for please.
Going to the next comment. Gavin Hart, appreciate you tuning in, man. This is the year. Bo Nix has improved. Listen, all Auburn fans should just stop right there. This is the year because that was all that was over Twitter. This is the year. Bo Nix has improved so much on this new offense. He's focused. He's having fun. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a dark horse for the Heisman. Listen, I don't want to get too far ahead. It was Akron. That's my only thing. If Bo Nix continues, if Bo Nix goes, Ralph, if he goes up to Happy Valley and goes 25 of 29 and throws for 312 and 4 touchdowns, okay, yeah, let's have the conversation.
He's comfy, baby.
He's real comfy. But no doubt about it. We'll see. Hey, Rachel, love the shirt. Hotty toddy. Hey, Ralph, show up for the people right there. Show a little Ole Miss playing night. Ralph's representing the family. We'll make 2 picks. AJ, I know right here we're going to talk about that later on because this is one of the more intriguing Group of 5 matchups. We're going to have a piece on that later on this week. Make sure you know what you can do, Ralph. You see in the bottom right there of our new little overlay, thecreditbooth.com. You can go there for our weekly picks. Fantastic right there. We're going to talk about this, Ralph, as we close out the show. Hey, it's been a heck of a show. Football's back. Ole Miss Louisville predictions. We know Lane Kiffin's not going to be at the sideline. We're not going to do an in-depth thing. I'll give you this right here, okay? The Louisville versus Ole Miss spread. Ole Miss by 9 at 9 points. The over-under is set at 74.5. Ole Miss is 13-4 in their last 17 games when playing as the favorite. For Louisville, the total has gone over 12 in their last 16 games. Now I'm going to lay this out for you, and then you tell me, okay? Last season, Louisville averaged over 440 yards of total offense, but their turnover margin was really bad. They have the offense to stay with Ole Miss, but we know Matt Corral and company and the Rebels are going to have a field day because, hey, when you play on turf, you're just a little bit faster. I think Ole Miss covers, and I don't know if I think I'm going to take the under. I think I'm going to take the under in this one. I think Ole Miss covers. I don't know if Louisville. I think we're going to see an improved defense from the Rebels. What do you say?
I have Ole Miss winning by at least 20. I mean, their offense is way too electric. Lane Kiffin or not, Ole Miss is an electric offense with Matt Corral, who is, to me, the front runner for the best quarterback in the SEC. And I know that because Bryce Young's still young, Matt Corral's been there, and no one really – and JT Daniels is right behind him. But Matt Corral is just so talented. He knows what he's doing back there. He's been comfortable. And I think Ole Miss has the talent, the weapons around him, and even in depth. You know, when you have a quarterback who's your backup who plays center field for the baseball team, who is quick as all get out and makes other teams look terrified when you have this white quarterback running there and he's running the read option the whole time.
Yeah. They've got weapons. There's no doubt about it. They have some weapons. We're going to go back as we end the show right here. I'm not going to let Ralph answer it. And Troy by 90. And we will roll. That is the end of the show. We appreciate everyone tuning in. It's a ton of fun. Ralph's looking for something. That's okay, though. Gavin Hart, real quick. Almost is going to keep putting up points. Just depends on if Louisville can keep up. I don't think they can. I'm taking Ole Miss to cover, but I'm taking the under. I think Ole Miss wins, but I think that Louisville puts up. I'm going final score 34-17. 34-17. I don't think that Louisville can keep up offensively. Hey, we appreciate you tuning in. We're going to be back. College football's back, Ralph. It's been a ton of fun talking with you. We're going to watch this Ole Miss Louisville game, and it's going to be so much fun just to have college football. What an opening weekend. We get to cap it off tonight. So everyone, you got about 8 minutes. Settle in, get your favorite snack, get yourself a nice cold beverage, and go ahead and watch Hotty Toddy take over Atlanta. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in. Have a fantastic Monday afternoon.